Hamas has refused, against all movement and trends in the region, against all urging of the Arab community in the region, against all indicators of the Arab Peace Initiative, against all efforts of peace, stubbornly refused to even accept the quartet principles and to disavow violence as a means of finding a negotiated way forward. A negotiated way forward is the only way, ultimately, to resolve the problems and actually establish a Palestinian state and put in place the security measures and other things necessary.
With America in the grip of domestic crises such as immigration and a pending lawsuit against the president, foreign policy has taken a temporary backseat in the alphabet soup media. But it's there. The Obama administration might be able to find some sunshine in the clouds, with the president getting support from his base on Iraq and the Republicans seemingly still floundering in what to do. Welcome back to MidPoint. Former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton and veteran Democratic strategist David Goodfriend, and Professor of Public Policy, Politics, and International Affairs at Georgetown University, a member of George W. Bush Sr.'s staff and veteran Republican strategist Bradley Blakeman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start things out, David, with you, because there is a tremendous amount of criticism that has been leveled at the president regarding some things that he has said about what's happening in the Middle East, some things he has not said. There are some who view that he is much too sympathetic towards Hamas, that he is not taking a hard enough line against them, and that, quite frankly, he is letting Benjamin Netanyahu just hang out there to dry. What are you gathering from all this now, and what, in your opinion, then, strategically, is the reality of the situation?
Well, I think that the president's support for a two-state solution in the Middle East is unambiguous and actually reflects large majorities in the United States generally and in the Jewish American community as well. And I think that we should not confuse that support for a two-state solution with support for Hamas. Those are two very different things. The president does not support Hamas. In fact, his administration has been very clear in targeting Hamas as a terrorist organization.
Well, no, I do want to point out that they're not saying that he supports Hamas, but they are very upset that he has not taken a harder line against what is considered a terrorist organization, and he has not been more forceful in speaking out against them. He seems almost to many people to be conciliatory.
Well, I think the president's style has raised a lot of concerns on all sides of the aisle. I mean, his foreign policy approach has been in direct contrast to his predecessor, Brad's former boss, George W. Bush. There's clearly an effort in the mind of President Obama to do things very differently than George W. Bush had done. And I would argue perhaps overcompensating for the cowboy diplomacy that preceded him. There's certainly, I think, some consensus among Democrats that there is a different, more forward-leaning posture to take in foreign policy. Now, I want to be quick to add, that does not necessarily translate into high-powered explosives, which have really not been all that successful at getting the results we want in the Middle East. However, it could translate into more direct economic measures, more direct diplomatic measures. And I think at least some decisiveness would be nice to see.
All right, Bradley, I hear the words cowboy diplomacy, and I'll bet you're just chafing at the bit here to go ahead and get involved in this right now, because there are a lot of people who will say what he is doing is simply wrong. He has laid back much too far and much too much on a lot of these issues right here, and is, quite frankly, in the commentary of some people, a little wimpy when it comes to all this.
Look, when your enemies don't fear you and your friends disrespect you, you have problems. And President Obama started out his presidency with disrespecting Israel, not going to Israel, going to Cairo, giving his famous speech, why can't we get along? Can't we just beat swords into plowshares? That's not the way it works, Mr. President. And the president has basically disrespected Israel, allowed the enemies to be emboldened, and now the entire Middle East under his tenure is in meltdown. Iran is closer to building a nuclear weapon. Almost every country surrounding Israel is in utter chaos. And this is what you get when you have appeasement and you don't have strong principled leadership. You embolden your enemies to do really terrible things. And we're seeing now Israel having almost to act alone because this White House has hung Israel out to dry.
All right, Bradley, I'm going to go ahead and now be critical of the Republicans for a moment here as well. I'll be equal opportunity for everybody here, because there are those who are saying, quite frankly, that the Republicans can't seem to agree on what to do in Iraq and the Middle East, and they're missing a grand opportunity here to get in here and create a solid foreign policy and really one-up the president here, but they're failing. True or false?
Well, look, the Republicans don't control foreign policy. Constitutionally, it's the president who makes treaties. It's the president whose portfolio is foreign policy. Remember, Republicans only control the House.
But should they
the
at
Senate's
least not be
controlled
speaking
by
out on it?
Democrats in the White House. What can the House do?
Should they at least not be speaking out on it? That's the point.
Oh, absolutely, we should be speaking out because the president isn't doing his job. He isn't representing this country like he should. He's not helping our friends. He's emboldening our enemies. Yes, that's the loyal opposition. We speak out, but we don't pick up our pen and our phone. We follow the Constitution.
David, go ahead. I heard you want to get in here.
Well, I think it's a little too cute for us to assume that this is a Republican-Democrat divide. It really isn't. It's within each party, people who are more isolationist, like Rand Paul on the Republican side, and people who are more interventionist, like Steny Hoyer, a Democrat from Maryland. I don't think that this breaks down neatly along partisan lines, and frankly, that's why you're seeing a division and frankly, indecisiveness on both sides. Americans are tired of war and tired of spending trillions of dollars and lives overseas when we see that simply doesn't work to impose our will on other countries. And I think that really is the source of the sort of indecisiveness you see among Republicans as well as Democrats. Are we really prepared to invade a country, to bomb a country, to die there, to kill there, when in reality, as we see in Iraq today, there is no guarantee that once you engage in that, you actually get results you like. And I think that is the source of the division within both political parties. It's much cleaner, in my view, to say, who are the interventionists? We can name them: John McCain, Lindsey Graham, to some extent, believe it or not, Harry Reid. And who are the isolationists, the people who want to pull away? Well, there's Rand Paul in the Republican Party, and there are Democrats in the Congress today who would say, I don't believe it's right to intervene. So that's where the breakdown lies.
Well, but it's fair to say, just a second, it's fair to say that indeed Americans don't want to go back to war, but don't you still have to put together a solid front? Shouldn't the United States still have a solid, positive meaning about this is what we are, this is what we stand for? I think that's the bigger thing here. Americans don't want to go back to war, but I think some of them are tired of being stepped on.
Yes, and I think what we see in the Middle East today, quite frankly, is the breakdown of the state entirely. Whether you look at Syria or Iraq or Egypt, and I'm very afraid about Jordan right now, we're seeing that longstanding states have eroded. There is no respect for the state. The state is, frankly, powerless. And so we see terrorist groups like ISIS rise up. Israel is completely surrounded by chaos. Now, let's be clear. Does the United States have the power to wave a magic wand and change that? I would argue no. I think we have to be a little more realistic about what the power of the United States is today. We're not dealing with the Soviet Union. We're not dealing with functioning city-states. We're dealing with chaos where entire nations are disintegrating. We're trying, I think unsuccessfully, trying to support democracy in these areas. I'm not even convinced that democracy works in some of these countries when we see the results that we're getting. So
okay, a couple of minutes I have left here. I have to interrupt because I want to be able to make sure to get Bradley in here. Bradley, your response.
Yeah.
My response is either we learn by history or we're condemned to repeat it. After World War I, America was tired of war. And we let Hitler get so powerful and rebuild and retool in violation of treaty that he couldn't be stopped alone. America had to step in after being attacked with us by Japan. We had to fight on many fronts. And either we can appease and wait for Hamas and those to get so strong that collectively our allies like Israel cannot fend off their attacks. We're going to be involved sooner rather than later unless we're smart now and we exercise the power that only the United States can have and help our friends. Make sure that Israel, we have their back, 100%. Unequivocal. And then let's get some of our other allies in there who have interest in this region to be engaged. And that takes leadership. And unless there's leadership by the United States, sooner rather than later, we're going to be dragged into this thing and it'll make Iraq look like a picnic.
Bradley, 15 seconds, and the first thing right now, the absolute first thing that the president needs to do for foreign policy right now. Pick one.
He needs to watch Israel's back. He has to make affirmative, positive statements on the world stage that we're moving ships into the area and that we're moving assets into the area and that we have Israel's back.
David, you're going to get the last word on it. Agree or disagree? What's your number one?
The Obama administration has done more militarily for Israel than any of its predecessors, regardless of how you measure it. That's being done today. The fact that Brad would say that, I think, reflects that we don't have all the answers as the United States today, and we shouldn't pretend like we do.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry we don't have 3 or 4 hours here because, quite frankly, I think we could go on and we could absolutely take that up. It would be easy to do. We're going to have the both of you back on again very soon. We're going to take a little more time and dig into some things here because I know that there's a whole lot more we could do. I thank you both for taking the time to join us, and both of you have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
You too. Thank you.
You too.
All right. Next up, there is only one living and breathing member of the planet that knows with complete certainty what was going to happen to the most talked about person in America today, and they tried, they deduced it, and we have the evidence when we go to Outland right here on MidPoint.